Greetings, magical souls. I hope everybody's doing well out there. And I just thought that I would record my musings on shadow work because I did speak about this a couple of videos ago. And I just think that with the way humanity is evolving, awakening, and all the shifts that we are going through at the moment, that shadow work or understanding shadow work may be helpful to some of you that maybe are new to it. The term's bandied around quite a bit, and I think that I've come to understand it a certain way, and obviously everything that I share today is the way I've experienced it and the way I see shadow work. And so, yes, so I'll get started right away. But the first thing is that for me, shadow work, self-work, and inner work are all part and parcel of the same thing, that the terms are interchangeable. So there was a famous psychologist called Carl Jung, and he did a lot of stuff. He actually founded a lot of stuff relating to the introvert and the extrovert and the archetypes and something called the collective unconscious. And I mean, you can go and look up his work, but he had some profound quotes. You know, you can find his quotes all over the internet, but I find him fascinating because a lot of this, I think the shadow work and things like that can be thought of as a little bit more woo-woo, but the Jungian side of things is a little bit more practical for those that, you know, prefer it more on the sort of this kind of plane, the psychology plane versus the more quantum plane. Essentially, for me, I love the way he words these things because it shows that this reality that we're living in, and the ego and the shadow self and our light self and all of these things, they're all interconnected, which really is the essence of everything, is it not? That we are all part of one, that we're all different, unique parts of the whole, expressing and experiencing itself in different ways. So it really is I mean, I don't think it's anything to be feared. And when somebody has what they call a dark night of the soul, for me, it essentially is a part of the soul or the inner being that is awakening and is ready to have the evolution and the growth that it possibly has chosen to have in this lifetime. And I say that because this isn't something that, I don't believe it's something that you can force and almost go looking for. It has to be a state of being that one arrives in, or arrives at. So in other words, anybody that might be sort of finding that they're questioning a lot of things, or they're questioning their existence, they're questioning the world. There's a certain amount of questioning that starts, and a sort of I like to refer to it as an awakening from the slumber that is almost the human condition. So when one starts to awaken, starts to question, and starts to want to almost find the meaning in life, find the meaning in themselves, find the meaning in all things. To me, this is when that almost inner self is starting to almost come knocking at the door, if you will. And that's when often shadow work or inner work, self-work, dark night of the soul, all those kinds of things, that to me is when it happens. So to me, generally this process starts when one starts to question themselves, the world, all those kinds of things. And it really has to be an organic process. I don't believe that you can force it. and it has to be a very authentic process and a very deep process. I mean, you've almost got to be pushed into that awakening to then start the internal examination, if you will, of exactly who you are. And so, and I do think that if you do it authentically, and if you do it with the intention of connecting to yourself for your self-expansion, for your growth, trying to understand yourself and all these things, then it will happen organically as well. And you will be guided as to when you might need somebody to help you along the way, or perhaps when you should give it a bit of a break, because these things can be quite overwhelming at times. And that's why there's often, if you look up shadow work and things like that, people say, you've got to be careful about your mental state, and you shouldn't tackle shadow work when you are, sort of rock bottom and that kind of thing, because it can be really destabilizing and hard. But at the same time, in my experience, the shadow work and the self work and the inner work has often come at a time when I'm almost at rock bottom, when I'm probably the least stable that I've ever been in my life. So for me, that's a tricky one. So I'm not encouraging anybody to run out there and go and start shadow work saying, oh, well, no matter what my mental state. That's not what I'm encouraging at all. What I'm saying is that if you have a connection to yourself when you do this, that you don't need to rush it. You will be guided, because I believe the soul will only give you what you can handle at that time. And you will be guided to go through this journey at a pace that is suitable for you and that will not harm you, because your soul has not got any interest in seeing you down in the dumps, as neither does spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call it. We cause our own suffering, but in the greater scheme of things, that's not really the point of all this. So I guess what I'm saying is that if it's truly an authentic journey and you find yourself there, all I'm encouraging you to do is to not be scared of doing shadow work, or to not be feeling like you're in that very dark place, to not want to look at the dark parts of yourself. But at the same time, as I say, if you are connected to your inner knowing, you will know whether you need somebody to guide you with this or to work with you. Maybe you can't do it alone, and that's perfectly fine. But generally, shadow work is quite a lonely path, and it's often something that you do need to do on your own, and you do on your own. But every now and again, you might be lucky enough that you might have a friend or a family member or a partner or a spouse that might have just gone through, or just be trailing behind you, or you're kind of going through this together, where you can actually talk about it. And even though your experiences are completely unique, you kind of understand where that person is when they are going, well, today's a bad day. Today I'm feeling like I'm coming undone at the seams. And so I think that it can be very, very beneficial to just at least have somebody to talk to who understands what this is. Because if you're really going within deep and doing that soul searching, which to me is what shadow work is, self work, inner work, it's soul searching work. And if you're trying to explain that to all of your friends who are still very much in the ego and haven't had anything like that, it's going to be very hard to connect with them, and to almost have somebody to hold that space for you, to just maybe offload, or even just talk through things. As they say, a problem shared is a problem halved. So it can be very useful, but at the same time, this journey is very unique. So even though you might be able to share how you're feeling and that kind of thing, the journeys will be completely unique. And some people will have a dark night of the soul that is very, very long and can last for years, as others will have sort of mini ones that sort of come and go. And that's why it's very unique, and it's very hard to almost pigeonhole it into one specific way that it'll happen or that it will unfold. So the thing about shadow work is that it's very much to me, it's almost like a tidying up, and it's a sort of delving into the deepest depths of oneself and looking at all those parts of you that you may not know are there, parts of you that you don't like, that you know are there. But it's all the subconscious stuff. And when you think about how, often throughout the years, people have said, oh, we only use 10% of our brains. And well, the 10% is the conscious part from my perspective, and 90% is the subconscious part. And that's where the shadow is. And what's important to remember about the subconscious part is that the conscious part is almost this lifetime, experiences from this lifetime. And even if you've had very traumatic experiences, you cannot even remember some of those things. But your subconscious, which is 90%, holds all the memories. And these can be even generational things and things from other lifetimes that you're still carrying. So, because it's important to remember that we do live on a plane of duality and polarity, and we can't really know the light without knowing the dark. Like we wouldn't know what sweet tasted like unless we'd had bitter. How would you describe sweet unless you knew bitter? How would you know what sweet was unless if you hadn't tasted bitter or sour? Or so it's that same thing. And we've, a lot of this is, when people talk about having past lives and things like that, and they go, oh, I was a queen, or oh, I was this, or oh, I was saving that. There's often a tendency that all these people had these past lives where they were doing something grand or something good. And I think that some of us have had past lives where we've been the darkness, because otherwise, how do we arrive back at the light? So we've chosen to experience these things. And, I've had a couple of sessions under hypnosis where people have traveled and they've discovered that they have, they maybe weren't very nice people in these lives. And that's why I say it's sometimes, maybe it's a little bit of that spiritual bypassing that they talk about, where everybody is love and light all the time, and they were love and light in every single life. I personally don't believe that we've all been love and light through every life, or we wouldn't be awakening where we are now and wanting to almost alchemize that darkness. And because the darkness is a part of us, it's not something that we're going to toss out. But that darkness is often the repressed and the parts of ourselves that society have said are not acceptable. And sometimes it's not even necessarily a dark part of yourself, but it's just maybe that you wanted to be something, but that was frowned upon by society, so you stuffed it down. And it almost becomes like your inner child has not been able to express itself the way it wanted to, and it was almost hushed and put away, and it wasn't okay for you to behave like that. So inner work, self work, shadow work, to me, is also very much inner child healing. And that's really why I don't think it's something to be feared, because it's part of you. It's part of your psyche. It's part of your soul. It's part of your makeup. And the thing with shadow work is that you don't want to banish it. You often have to just accept it. And sometimes you need to forgive it. And sometimes, there can be various things, but really it's a part of you. And you can't just get rid of it. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, that on the other side of shadow work, inner work, healing your inner child is such magic, because you, with every little bit that you do, even though when you're there, you go, oh no, I don't want to feel like this, but it's the facing of those feelings and all of these things that we've suppressed and we've maybe not dealt with up to now, that we've just packed away. But when you come out of it, each time you come out of it, you're able to see things from different perspectives. You're able to appreciate other people's perspectives. You're able to understand yourself. You're able to, there's an expansiveness that comes with it that enables you to be kinder to yourself, to love yourself more, to be kinder to others. Because if you have it, obviously, if you're cultivating that within you, naturally, you're going to be able to give it to everybody else. So for me, shadow work is really important. And I think that possibly over the next couple of years, if people have just started doing shadow work or just started to have their awakening, and maybe they've been going through it for 10 years, maybe they've been going it through for 20 years, I believe that all of us are going to be doing a lot of shadow work in the upcoming years. So the one quote that I love of Jung is this one, and that is, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That to me just sums it all up. I mean, you can't find the light just by being the light. You almost have to go and dig through the darkness, because how can you know light if you don't know dark? So, and then his quote on what the shadow was is, that hidden, repressed, and for the most part inferior and guilt-laden personality, whose ultimate ramifications reach back into the realm of our animal ancestors. So there is the shadow. So he's talking about the hidden part of our personality, the guilty part, the inferior part, and that dates back to the realm of our animal ancestors. And that's why I say a lot of what's in there isn't even from this life. It's just stuff that you may still be carrying. I think that's really why when I do my quantum hypnosis sessions, when people travel to other lives, they can really have the most, some of these sessions that I do, people have these shadow work or revelations in those hypnotherapy sessions. So it's really quite interesting. So just on that, the other important thing to remember is that if you think of your 10% of your conscious mind, but 90% is the subconscious, and that's really running the show. That's really why if you have if your subconscious has programs, beliefs, is carrying traumas and hurt from other lives and that kind of thing, if your subconscious basically runs the show. And that's why if your subconscious is weighed down with all this shadow that you really want to just lift and transmute, no amount of positive thinking and doing things consciously with the other 10% of your mind, no amount of positive thinking and trying to do things and trying to manifest things is really going to help, because your subconscious is running the show. So if you're trying to tell yourself, for example, that you believe in yourself and that you're going to do this and you're going to get X, Y, and Z project up and running, if your subconscious is riddled with a self-doubt, I can't do this, I'm not worthy, it is you telling yourself that you're going to do this isn't really going to gel. So you must remember that you can't just send the thought out there, it's the energy behind it. And I think because the subconscious is such a big part of us, the energy behind it is much bigger. So you're almost telling the universe one thing, but your energy is telling it something completely opposite. So it's an important thing to remember. What I really feel the benefit of shadow work and inner work and healing your inner child is that you start to align your subconscious and your conscious. Because if you can get them on the same page, just imagine the magic that you can create. So I hope that's helped to just really explain the basics of shadow work. And it's not to be taken lightly, but it's not something to be feared. So, and of course, if you need a coach, you know, there are many ways of doing shadow work. And I alluded the last time I spoke about this, that I've been finding using tarot cards a really, really good way. I mean, but I've been doing shadow work for a while now. Journaling is another thing that I do. I believe journaling is really powerful, and it's because it gets you almost into that alpha state, like when you drive in a car. So while your brain is concentrating on writing the words, your subconscious can come out and form the words that you are writing. And often if you're journaling, and particularly you can be in a really upset state, you can be crying, you can be very angry, you can be all these things. But if you journal, afterwards, sometimes you can read it and you don't even remember writing what's on the page, because it hasn't come from the conscious, it's come from the subconscious. So journaling can be a very, very powerful way of doing it. And I've gotten into the habit of journaling every single morning now. And sometimes I'll journal several times a day if I'm called to. So journaling is really powerful. You can have a spiritual coach. You can use meditation. You can even have a mainstream psychologist, to examine these aspects of yourself. Just see what calls to you. Sit with it and go into your heart and see what it is that you might be able to do. And yeah, it's not easy work, but it's really the only way to grow, because you get pushed out of your comfort zone and you start questioning everything, and then you are going to come across things that you don't like. You're going to come across things that you don't want to acknowledge. And you're also going to come across things that you realize are not even yours. But the thing about doing this work is that it is so expansive and so empowering. And I really want to just touch on that, because obviously people have had incredibly traumatic experiences, childhoods, other lives, this life, whatever it might be. But just know that if something does come up, I believe that your soul knows that you are ready to handle it. You are strong enough. So don't shy away. If you find yourself having this dark night of the soul, or this place where life feels like it's falling apart, try and just connect deeply within, and just allow your soul to guide you as to what you need to be doing. So you need to trust your soul. You need to trust your journey. You need to trust in the universe, spirit, God, whatever you want to call it. But trust that nothing will be thrown your way that you cannot handle. And trust that when it does happen, that it's happening at the right time for you to tackle it. So that's the other thing, is don't be in a rush to do shadow work. Do it in a manner that is just let it unfold. It's not a race, and you can't be going, oh, my friends are doing shadow work, so now I must do shadow work. No, this is something that really needs to be your own journey. It's not a race, it's a journey, and just allow the process to unfold. But the thing is that the soul chose all these experiences. You need to remember that your soul chose these experiences, chose them for learning, growth, expansion, all of these things. And when you come out of the other side of the darkness, and remember, that's one more thing. When you're at rock bottom, where's the only way to go but up? So sometimes the rock bottom is a sign that you're now going to look at things, and then the only way from there is up. But what's really, really good about it is that it takes you out of victimhood, because when you're able to see these things, as I said, from another perspective and just with a greater understanding of yourself and others and things like that, it takes you out of the victimhood. You stop feeling like everything's happened to you, and you start to understand that there are many perspectives and many ways to look at these things. So it's really happening for you, not to you. And it's very, very empowering, because you start to really understand yourself. You start to understand why you behave like you do, and why you've been triggered, and lots of little things. Really hard to explain if you haven't done the work. But anything that triggers you, or that pushes you into that dark abyss, just means that you're ready to grow and expand. All triggers are an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for healing. And I believe that when you're called to examine your shadow, and heal your inner child, that is just because you're ready to drop the baggage. You're ready to drop the limiting beliefs, the programs, all these things that you are doing that are no longer serving you. Remember, your soul knows exactly what you need, and you will come to a point where you might even just be feeling a bit stuck. It might even not be uncomfortable, but you might just go, oh, this relationship is not working for me anymore. And then you'll go, but why isn't it working for me? Or you might even end it and then go, but why did I do that? And can even just be that little bit of introspection. So, but it means that there's something around that is no longer serving you, and it's ready to be transformed, released, looked at, embraced, acknowledged, forgiven, whatever the case is. Now, the other quote that I just love from Jung is this one: how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. So that is that in and of itself, I mean, as I said, everybody's made up of dark and light. So it's yeah, there's a book. Sorry, I digress a bit, but it is related. There is a book, if anybody's interested, and it is called The Middle Passage. Now, I'll put the title and the author in the description box. But it essentially, it wasn't written by Jung, but it is based on a lot of his philosophies and teachings. And it really is, the middle passage is about this midlife crisis that most of us experience. And essentially it takes you through and it explains some things, but it really is quite a powerful book if anybody wants to read it. But when people go through their midlife crises, where they maybe divorce their spouse and then go for a younger one, or buy the sports car, or do all those things that we do in midlife, that's often when somebody's having a dark night of the soul, or having this awakening, and where they're being forced to confront what it is that they actually are. And instead of going and doing that, what they do is they distract themselves with the new spouse and the sports car and all of these things. So it's quite interesting. And a lot of us actually, start to question things when we're midlife, which is, where the term the midlife crisis comes from. So, it's, as I say, it's all connected, and it can be it is a really empowering journey. And the other thing to remember about the shadow is that it's often seen as negative, but you must remember that everything that you've buried in there, so all those things that I said before that society may have deemed unacceptable, imagine if some of those things that you squashed down, that you were told you weren't allowed to be or do, imagine if those things are some of your greatest gifts or some real gems. So the shadow is not just the negative side of things. You might have buried things in there that are things that would have just propelled you into the best and highest version of yourself. But for some reason, when you were whatever time you were living at, or whatever community you were living in, you weren't allowed to be yourself and express yourself in that way. So never forget that it has all the hidden and suppressed parts of ourselves, but that includes also our hidden and our underdeveloped strengths and gifts. So sometimes, as much as it can be dark work and it can be hard work, there's definitely some gems along the way. And that was the other thing I think is really important to mention about shadow work, is that it's not all doom and gloom, because there are real pockets of greatness and pockets of magic in the darkness, So because remember, the darkness is not necessarily things that you've intentionally gone and done that are dark and disturbing. They are just really the suppressed and hidden parts of you that maybe didn't feel safe to be themselves, or you didn't feel safe to be seen, or didn't feel safe to express yourself in a certain way. So, but the problem is that if you do that, then it's almost like the passive aggressive person who keeps squashing down things because they're trying to be polite, and then all of a sudden ends up in an incident where you direct all that rage from all those things to somebody who's almost an innocent bystander and who hasn't actually done anything, who's just looked at you funny. So it's just because it's repressed and it's hidden and it's been packed down, it's been told to be quiet, and it's not safe, and it's not that energy around not being allowed to be the self has got to go somewhere. And the more we pack it down, and that's why I feel like it is the inner child, the more angry and the more upset it gets, it becomes like that passive aggressive a little version of you inside that goes, I want to be seen, I want to be heard, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with me. Why am I not allowed to be seen and heard? And I think something that sort of struck me was how much we invest in things in this life. So we invest in our education, we invest in our careers, our jobs, we invest in our relationships. So we invest in all these things. We even invest in investments with money. But why do we not invest in ourselves? And to me, shadow work is, if you are doing shadow work and you are meeting the darkest, deepest parts of yourself, and you are trying to do the work, the inner work, trying to understand why you've got triggers, why you've got patterns, why you've got habits, and in doing that are actually healing yourself. I just think that it's quite profound how we just don't invest in ourselves, and why wouldn't we? But that's really been part of this paradigm, hasn't it? Because, if we invest in ourselves, well, then the illusion of all that's around us really falls away. And so I would encourage shadow work. I think it's the greatest investment you can do in yourself, because if you think about the saying, as within, so without, if you are investing in yourself, in your true self, in your shadow, you are, by implication, when you make friends and peace with that inner self or that dark part of yourself, automatically everything outside of you transforms and becomes different, because you are different and because you understand things. So you won't maybe necessarily getting the same mirrors back, which the mirrors and the triggers only show you where you need to heal. So by implication, your investment in yourself will make your relationships richer, possibly your career richer, all these kinds of things. And I just go, so why don't we invest in ourselves? Why do we always invest in everything outside of ourselves? So on that note, I do think that shadow work can be our greatest gift. And because every time you go through the shadow, you emerge out on the other side as a newer, more expanded version of yourself. I don't want to say a better version of yourself, because I don't believe that's the right term, but every time you come out of it, you are an expanded, more conscious, maybe that's a good word, expanded, more conscious version of yourself. And by understanding yourself, you really can change your reality, because at the end of the day, we are the only ones that we have any control over. We don't have any control over all those external influences. So that's why I think shadow work can be so powerful. And I do hope that this video has helped to shed a little bit of light on the dark of the shadow. So yeah, feel free to comment, and I can possibly go into something a little bit deeper